Coming up today, Korea's rival parties agree to pass a $9.5 billion supplementary budget bill today in a bid to revive the economy in the wake of the MERS outbreak and the recent drought. Japan's Mitsubishi Materials will reportedly apologize and pay compensation to more than 3,000 Chinese people forced to work for the company during World War II. Plus, NASA scientists hunting for another Earth-like planet have found what may be the closest match yet. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello and welcome. It's 6 a.m. on Friday, July 24th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome and you're tuned in to our early morning edition of Arirang News. Our top story this morning: after days of strenuous and tense negotiations, Korea's rival parties have finally agreed to pass a multi-billion-dollar supplementary budget bill, and they will do so later today. The two sides will also open a briefing session at the parliamentary committee level to resolve hacking allegations surrounding the nation's spy agency. Jiyeon starts us off.
Rival party negotiators reached a striking deal on Thursday to pass the nearly $10 billion extra budget, which is a reduced version from the original budget proposed by the government.
This supplementary budget will help cover the damage from the MERS outbreak and the drought, as well as revive the faltering economy. We cannot be split over livelihood bills.
The proposed supplement is expected to help Korea maintain its economic growth at the 3% level, create some 124,000 new jobs, and make up for a tax revenue shortfall. The ruling party also decided to accept the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy's demands to consider raising corporate taxes to reduce a fiscal deficit. In regards to the National Intelligence Service hacking scandal, the two parties agreed to be briefed by the NIS at the National Assembly's Intelligence Committee in the second week of August, hoping that the hearings could ease the public's concerns on the matter.
The alleged illegal hacking and surveillance by the NIS has caused anxiety among the public. This anxiety should be resolved for the sake of national security.
The NIS hacking scandal intensified after an employee committed suicide last week, leaving behind a note saying that the spy agency did not wiretap citizens and meddled in elections. However, this did not stop the NPAD from pressing charges at the prosecutor's office against the former NIS chief, as well as the company that facilitated the purchasing of the hacking program back in 2012. Jiyeon, Arirang News.
Japanese firm Mitsubishi Materials has agreed to compensate Chinese people over its use of forced labor during World War II. According to Tokyo-based Kyodo news agency, the company will officially apologize and pay the 3,765 victims some $60 million. That means they'll receive around $16,000 each. It marks the first time for a Japanese company to agree to compensate such a large number of Chinese forced laborers over its wartime atrocities. The company is yet to extend the same apology and compensation to Korean workers conscripted to forced labor. However, it claims the situation is different because Koreans were technically Japanese citizens ordered to work under Tokyo's colonial rule at that time. A group of American lawmakers has condemned Japan's attempts to whitewash history and slammed Tokyo's continual territorial claims to Korea's easternmost island of Dokdo. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
A group of U.S. lawmakers is urging Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to offer an apology for Japan's use of Korean women as sex slaves before and during World War II. At the opening of the Korean-American Grassroots Conference in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, U.S. Republican Congressman Ed Royce came out strong, saying that he does not want to see Japan whitewash history anymore. He added that the sex slave issue should be part of school textbooks in Japan. Royce also touched upon Japan's claims to Korea's easternmost island of Dokdo, saying that anyone who studies history knows Dokdo is part of Korean territory. Congressman Mike Honda echoed his views, saying that Tokyo needs to offer a sincere apology for the comfort woman issue, and reiterated Royce's statement about including both issues in school textbooks. 13 members of Congress attended the conference, promising to do all they can to urge Japan to issue an apology for its past wrongdoings. The conference, organized by Korean American Civic Empowerment, aims to strengthen Korean Americans' political power. The Korean delegation was led by Saenuri Party lawmaker Na Kyung-won, along with a handful of other lawmakers. More than 200,000 women, mostly Koreans, are believed to have been forced into sex slavery by the Japanese military before and during World War II. Experts say time is of the essence, as there are only 48 surviving Korean comfort women who are still alive. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now, civic groups from the two Koreas met on Thursday to discuss holding a joint Liberation Day celebration in their respective capitals in August. However, as with most inter-Korean talks, at the early stages at least, not much progress was made, but the two sides have agreed to sit down again next week. Kim Jiyeon reports.
Civic groups from the two Koreas failed to reach an agreement in its meeting held on Thursday to jointly hold a Liberation Day celebration next month. The two sides, however, agreed to meet again in North Korea's joint inter-Korean industrial complex of Kaesong next Friday. During the talks, the North Korean side officially asked its southern counterpart to participate in its three-day national unification event starting August 13 to mark the 70th anniversary of the Korean Peninsula's liberation from Japan. To this, the South Korean civic group responded that it'll make a decision on the matter pending further discussion with its government. Meanwhile, the South Korean group invited the North to participate in various civic events held in the country and to simultaneously convene a Liberation Day celebration in Seoul and Pyongyang, in which the North said it'll discuss and deliberate on the offer. The South Korean government has said earlier that it'll support a joint Liberation Day celebration with North Korea. A high-level government official said Seoul is trying to improve inter-Korean ties through civilian exchanges, which is also the reason why it approved the South Korean group's request to visit the North. If the two sides agree to co-host an event, it'll be the first time in 10 years that the two Koreas celebrate Liberation Day together. Kim Jiyeon, Arirang News.
The secretary of the North Korean Workers' Party, Kim Ki-nam, the man in charge of the party's propaganda department, has reappeared in Pyongyang's media reports after falling off the radar back in April. The North Korean Central News Agency reported Thursday that the 86-year-old escorted Kim Jong-un to a museum to mark what it calls atrocities committed by U.S. forces during the Korean War. Now, his absence heightened speculation that Kim Jong-un's younger sister, Kim Yo-jong, had taken over the party's propaganda department because of Kim Ki-nam's either failing health or as punishment for some kind of negligence. Kim Ki-nam has worked in North Korea's propaganda department since the 1960s. He's widely viewed as a key player in legitimizing the hereditary succession of the ruling Kim dynasty. South Korea's arms procurement agency will form a new body that will handle the country's large-scale weapons programs. The head of Korea's Defense Acquisition Program Administration says the new civilian-led department will be established by October. It'll be in charge of making decisions for Korea's biggest arms development projects worth in excess of $25 billion. The new body will also be responsible for sharing defense technology with private firms. The move is part of Korea's efforts to make military procurement deals more fair. Korean auto giant Hyundai Motor has unveiled a rather disappointing report card for the second quarter. The automaker's operating profit slumped more than 16% from the previous year to roughly $1.5 billion, while sales rose a mere 0.3% to slightly under $20 billion. The sluggish performance is attributed to stronger competition at home and abroad, as well as the weak Japanese yen, which has been eroding the price competitiveness of local automakers against their Japanese rivals. Korea's Samsung Electronics continues to dominate the global smartphone market despite its slowing sales. According to the latest data from market researcher International Data Corporation, smartphone manufacturers shipped a total of 337.2 million smartphones worldwide In the second quarter this year, that's up 11.6% from the same period last year. The figure represents the second highest quarterly total on record. Now, by company, Samsung Electronics led the market with shipments of 73 million units, followed by Apple, Huawei, Xiaomi and Lenovo. That said, Samsung was the only one out of the top 5 to see its shipments decrease. They slipped 2.3% from last year. IDC attributes Samsung's losses to limited supplies of its new Galaxy S6 Edge model. Now, it's a known fact that prices of goods and services rise over time depending on supply, demand and, of course, inflation. But how much have things changed in South Korea since the country's liberation from Japanese colonial rule in 1945? Our Kim Min-ji takes a look.
Back then, 40 kilos of Korea's staple food rice cost 0.35 won, a fraction of a cent. The price rose to about $10 in the mid-1970s and $50 by the 90s. Today, that same 40 kilos goes for about $70. A packet of ramyeon noodles, a favorite Korean snack, was priced at 10 won in 1963, but has since jumped 76-fold to less than $1 now. And what about entertainment? Koreans would have paid less than 2 won for a movie ticket 60 years ago, whereas they're shelling out about $10 now. TV license fees, the price households pay to have a TV, have also increased 25-fold to about $2. Now, to get around, Seoulites in the 1950s paid just 2 won for the bus. Since then, the price has gone up to 1,300 won. Maybe that's because petroleum prices have also jumped nearly 420-fold. The price variations have changed in response to supply and demand and have also been influenced by the quantity of substitute products the country imports and the price fluctuations in that country. Despite this steady increase over the years, Korea's consumer prices have not risen in recent months. They've been below the 1% mark, far below the government's target of 2.5%. But how do consumers feel?
If I spent about $30 on my groceries last year, I'm paying about $40 for the same amount this year.
Now I have to really pay attention to the prices. I tend to compare the prices of similar foods and buy the cheaper ones. Overall, prices have gone up, especially for processed food.
Experts say this is because the prices for products that consumers tend to buy regularly have risen, even though consumer prices have generally been low.
The government needs to manage the prices of products that people buy a lot, such as produce, by securing a greater supply or increasing imports when there's a shortage. They should also not increase public utility fees all at once, so that consumers don't feel it.
That task is something of a double-edged sword for the government, as it will have to limit the blow felt by consumers to encourage spending, but at the same time reach its inflation target for economic growth. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, more exciting space-related news, because a NASA mission has discovered a planet which it believes is the closest likeness to Earth found so far. Officials from the space agency say Kepler 452b, described as a bigger, older cousin to Earth, is the smallest planet found so far that lives within a so-called habitable zone around a star similar to our own sun. Located 1,400 light-years from us, Kepler 452b is roughly 60% larger than Earth, but its orbit is only 385 days, just 20 days longer than Earth. Now, NASA says the planet has spent around 6 billion years in the so-called habitable zone, 1.5 billion years longer than Earth, and its star has a similar temperature and mass to our sun. Scientists believe that it is more than enough time for life to have been established somewhere either on its surface or in its oceans. Britain's Financial Times newspaper has been sold to Japanese media company Nikkei for $1.3 billion. The sale of the 127-year-old newspaper was announced on Thursday local time in the UK. It does not include the Financial Times' London headquarters or its 50% stake in The Economist. The Pearson Group, the previous owner, says the sale will allow it to concentrate on its core global education business. The new owner, Nikkei, is one of the biggest media companies in Japan, spanning everything from newspapers and business TV channels to magazines and digital media. As with most newspapers over the last decade or so, the FT's print circulation has fallen sharply, but its digital subscriber base is on the up and up, jumping more than 20% on year to over 500,000 in the latest figures. Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Have a wonderful weekend, and thank you as always for tuning in. And we do hope to see you at the same time on Monday. Until then, goodbye.